Good morning, everyone. My name is Dayton Fiddler, a current 1L here at CU Law, and thanks for making the trip to CU for this amazing event. We're thrilled to have such an incredible gathering of legal scholars, technologists, policymakers, and industry leaders, all coming together to discuss one of the most critical challenges of our time, how we navigate the legal, ethical, and societal implications of increasingly autonomous AI systems. I have the pleasure of introducing our keynote speaker, CU Law Professor Harry Surden. Professor Surden is on the faculty of the CU Law School and is also the director of the Silicon Flatiron Artificial Intelligence Initiative. He is also the associate director of Stanford University's Codex Center for Legal Informatics. As a professor here at Colorado Law, his research and scholarship has been instrumental in shaping how we think about AI's impact on legal systems, regulations, and governance. Please join me in welcoming Professor Harry Surden.
Thank you so much, Dayton, for that kind introduction. So I want to welcome you all to the Silicon Flatiron Center here at the University of Colorado Law School. It's really a pleasure to be here, and I'm really delighted you can join us for this conference on autonomous systems and AI autonomous agents. As Dylan said, I am a law professor here. I'm also the director of the Silicon Flatiron's Artificial Intelligence Initiative and also associate director of Stanford's Codex Center. Before we begin, I want to say a little bit more about the Silicon Flatiron Center, what we do, what makes us special. So the Silicon Flatiron Center is a technology, law, and policy center housed at the University of Colorado Law School. And what we do is we initiate, sustain, and elevate public conversations about technology, law, policy, and entrepreneurship, and inspire, prepare, and place students in these important areas. So I think this description kind of encapsulates a lot of what we do. The first thing I want to point out is that what's our focus? Our focus is on technology, law, policy, and entrepreneurship. So these are our subject areas that we focus upon. Another word in there I think is important is public. We have a public-facing mission. The reason we have you all here today is our desire to educate the public and to discuss leading-edge issues to make our society a better place. And then finally, our most important focus are our students. The University of Colorado is an educational institution, and our main goal, in addition to helping the public, is to educate our students and get them out in the world, get them jobs that are making a difference in society. We have a particular focus that is really interesting and somewhat unique in academia. Our particular philosophy is that when we have these important discussions about emerging technology like AI or autonomous vehicles, it's really important to involve multiple perspectives. Perspectives from government, from the private sector, from the nonprofit sector, and from academia. And this is fairly unusual in academic settings. Typically, in academic settings, it's a bunch of professors talking to other professors, which is fine, but it's missing a whole lot of perspectives. And in our environment, we want to bring in the private sector, businesses and organizations that are doing interesting work, nonprofits, which are fighting for human rights and have a mission to improve the world. We also want to bring in the government expertise, recognizing the important role of state, local, and federal government. But last but not least, professors and academia, those who are spending a lot of time thinking about these issues. And we find that when we bring all these perspectives together, we get some of the most fruitful discussions that can make a difference in society. Another perspective we have is that we try and inform the public about the state of technology, law, and policy today, what's going on to the best of our ability, but also we try and peer around the corner a little bit and be humble, but also trying to extrapolate out from current trends what's likely to happen in the near future. So we like to think, our motto is know what's next, and we kind of peer around the corner a little bit. Before we get started, I have a whole lot of thank yous I want to give. It took a tremendous amount of work to put this conference together. First and foremost, I want to thank our amazing Silicon Flatiron's team. We have Sarah Schnickgrund, Christine McCloskey, Shannon Surden, and Nate Mariotti, who worked incredibly hard to put this conference together. So please join me for a round of applause thanking them. I want to thank the rest of the Silicon Flatirons team, our director, Brad Bernthal, who unfortunately couldn't be here today, our faculty directors, some of which are here, Dale Hatfield, Keith Grimben, who will be on the panel, Margot Kaminsky, who was supposed to be here, unfortunately, but had to bow out because of illness, and several other faculty directors, including Blake Reed. Also our faculty fellows, including Melanie Kay, Gabrielle Daly, and of course our founder, Attorney General Phil Weiser. We would not be here without his efforts, who started this center many years ago. Also want to thank the CU Law Dean, Lolita Buckner-Innes, who also unfortunately couldn't be here today, and the tremendous CU Law staff and faculty. We have several faculty members here today on our tremendous law faculty. Our expert panelists who have flown in from far and wide, including as far as DC, North Carolina, various places to share their expertise. All the students, there's a number of students who worked really hard to volunteer and make this happen. And then finally, all of you, I want to thank all of you for coming, both you in the audience and the many of you who are online watching this remotely. So we're really grateful for the Silicon Flatiron supporters. Without your support, we couldn't put on programs like this. So we have many individual supporters, as well as many law firms and businesses and nonprofit who contribute in various ways. And it's those contributions and those support that allow us to do the work we do. So we're very grateful for your support. So let's talk a little bit about the conference today. We're going to have 3 panels. And of course, this is going to be focused on autonomous AI agents from 3 different perspectives. I will be giving the opening keynote. Now, I'll say you'll be seeing a lot of me today, and not because I have the only voice, but largely because we've had a lot of unexpected illnesses and last-minute cancellations, and I'm pitching in here and there for a few people who had to back out at the last minute due to family illnesses. So if you see me in multiple roles, just know that I'm pitching in there. So in addition to be doing the keynote, I will also be moderating panel 1, which will be development in autonomous agent systems. I'll also be moderating panel 2, the policy, legal, and regulatory issues in AI software agents. And you'll have a reprieve for me with panel 3, which will be moderated by the excellent Keith Grimben, which will be studying autonomous vehicles, physical autonomous systems, as opposed to autonomous software agents. So in a moment, I'll start the keynote. I'll leave several minutes in the end for Q&A for the audience, because I know that that's often one of the most valuable aspects of our discussions here. So without further ado, let me jump into the keynote. And our keynote address is going to be looking at largely what's gone on recently with respect to with artificial intelligence generally, and then autonomous systems specifically, and we'll be defining a lot of those words. I know a lot of you in the audience are not necessarily technology specialists or even legal specialists. I'll be trying to bring us all up to speed on the same page with some visual demonstrations of what's going on. So my talk here today, I'll be giving you an overview of artificial intelligence, just letting you know what's going on, talking about the exciting changes that have happened in the last 2 to 3 years, because there have been dramatic changes that I'm sure you've all heard on the news or maybe even have experienced yourself. Then I'll be talking about, in particular, focusing on autonomous AI agents. What does that mean? How is that distinct from AI generally? And then we'll talk about some of the unique benefits and concerns raised by this new era of autonomous software and physical agents. So let's just start with a level setting discussion. What is artificial intelligence? or AI generally. There's no one definition that everyone would agree with, but I find this definition useful. And AI is enabling computers to solve problems, make predictions, answer questions, or generate creative output, or make automated decisions on tasks that we normally associate with human intelligence. So there's no widely agreed upon definition of human intelligence either. But generally speaking, we associate human intelligence with a variety of higher order cognitive or brain skills. These include things like visual spatial processing, language understanding and creation, abstract reasoning, problem solving, planning, learning, metacognition, for example. So anytime we take one of these tasks that when humans do it and we associate it with some sort of intelligence, whether it's playing chess, which involves planning and reasoning, or doing math or a physics problem with involves some sort of analytical planning, abstract reasoning, philosophy, creation of documents, lawyering. These are all tasks that we normally associate with this abstract idea of human intelligence. If we can get a computer to do these same tasks associated with intelligence, those are AI or artificial intelligence tasks. So let me just give you an example here. We think lawyers are intelligent. I know they are because I teach them for a living. So we normally associate the kind of thing that lawyers do, which are things like legal document creation or reading, or legal analysis and planning, or legal problem solving, client counseling. With intelligence, it involves higher order abstract reasoning, planning, solving problems. So here is an example of a tool many of you have used, which is ChatGPT, one of the earliest versions of ChatGPT, GPT-4. And I'm asking it to write a merger agreement, which is a type of legal document that lawyers can perform, which involves merging two companies. And for the first time in 2023, and now subsequently, these systems can generate highly competent first drafts. And we'll emphasize in this talk, they could never do that before. Prior to 2022, this was an impossibility from AI technology. So we had a huge leap in AI capabilities since about 2022. And I'll show you exactly what happened there. A few caveats. I'm going to use words like thinking, reasoning in the context of AI systems, but I want to emphatically emphasize these are not human-like systems. These are AI systems of today, like ChatGPT or Claude, can simulate ever more convincingly human output and emotions. But decidedly, they are simulating using statistics and probability. They don't have emotions. They don't have inner human experiences, and it's easy to anthropomorphize them and think that they are human because they produce ever more convincing output. And in fact, we anthropomorphize them by using words like thinking, reasoning, acting, deciding. But just remember, if you hear me saying things like that, these are metaphors. They're simulating useful human output statistically. We know that the way they operate is very different from the way human cognition operates. Okay, so how did we get here with AI? So AI has been around for a long time, and I won't go through the whole history of it. What I want to emphasize is kind of the era between 2010 and 2022. So there was a sort of big move in AI, and everything that's happened since 2022. So we had very capable AI systems prior to 2022, but they were very much narrow or domain specific. So what do I mean by that? Most AI systems prior to 2022 had one particular job and could only do that one job. So for example, a narrow AI system of that era might learn how to play chess. Such a chess playing system could do it at a superhuman level, but it couldn't, for example, write philosophy or write a poem or draft a legal document. We saw AI systems that could engage in prediction, who's the most, what product is most likely going to be useful for an Amazon purchaser given their past Amazon purchases. They did things like sorting email by spam and not spam. So these things got very capable, but decidedly they were narrow in focus. They could only do one thing and one thing very well. And we saw these kind of narrow systems proliferate in healthcare and in law, doing things like categorizing documents as likely relevant to a lawsuit or irrelevant, or in medicine, looking at various test result numbers and making predictions about various diseases. There was a big step change in 2022, and this is the release of ChatGPT, which I'll talk about. And what happened was they mostly cracked the code of human language. So one of the things that AI systems struggled with prior to 2022 was reasoning and understanding ordinary human language. And they largely cracked that, along with many other obstacles, which I'll talk about. So this was a big deal. So I like to, although AI has been around for a while and has been involved in our lives for at least 20 years, only in the last 2 to 3 years have we seen super capable AI systems that could operate within domains of knowledge and language, a point I'll emphasize in a second. So, and this came about with a large leap of AI capabilities in late 2022, November 2022, with the release of ChatGPT 3.5 by OpenAI. So there was good reason, there was a lot of excitement through this. I've studied this area for 20 years, and this was a huge advancement. So although there is a lot of hype, in many respects it is due, because there was a large leap between the capabilities before 2021 and after 2022, kind of a step change. And as I said, earlier AI models prior to 2022 very much struggled with a variety of important tasks that we associate with human intelligence, understanding ordinary language. They just basically, you couldn't type in arbitrary text to AI models prior to 2022 and expect to reliably get coherent output. We couldn't expect reliable common sense reasoning. We never saw arbitrary problem solving. So here's an example of a model just right before ChatGPT, which was the state of the art. I've been testing these for years, and I would ask them common sense question, these old AI models that could, do things like write poetry. I'd ask them kind of silly things that a toddler would know the answer to. How many legs does an apple have? And a human toddler would laugh and say, apples don't have legs. But the AI models at that time would confidently tell you things like, an apple has 4 legs. And they would make all sorts of common sense reasoning errors to the point where nobody really took them seriously as artificial intelligence because they weren't that smart. The outputs they were producing were not that useful. And I have all sorts of other demonstrations for how these earlier models couldn't produce legal documents coherently. So it was the ChatGPT moment in November 22 that changed all this. There were a bunch of technical innovations that I won't go to. ChatGPT 3.5 solved this issue and suddenly became broadly useful. So just this, I immediately tested, of course, ChatGPT when it came out with the Apple question and a bunch of my other common sense reasoning questions. And it obviously aced it the way a human would do. And this was the first time an AI system could do this and many other common sense reasoning questions. So this is what got AI researchers so excited. We never saw this before in AI systems. And because of this, this is what has allowed AI systems like ChatGPT, Claude, and others to take on knowledge work. We never had systems that could escape beyond the narrow domains of playing chess or spotting financial fraud to a broader category of knowledge work. And the reason is, as I mentioned, is because they basically crack the ability to analyze and understand language. And I'll talk about that in a second, but this was the first set of models capable to reason and problem solve for any problem you could give it. Now, to be clear, it didn't always get it right, and it still doesn't always get it right. So this is a mistake people make. These systems occasionally make hallucinations. They solve problems wrong, But the main point to emphasize is the earlier models before 2022 couldn't even do it at all. So just getting systems that could sometimes solve problems on their own was a giant leap in capability. And as I'll show you, they've only gotten better and better every year. So what you may know about models from the headlines from 2 or 1 years ago are no longer true because the models keep getting better. So a lot of the knowledge is outdated. That said, I want to emphasize these systems do make mistakes, and I'll keep emphasizing you need to double and triple check their work. I use them frequently, but I double and triple check their work. So after November 2022, just a few months later, GPT-4 was released, and it improved on GPT 3.5. So the systems immediately, they went from getting good to really good in a very short amount of time in 2023. Now, as I said, what this enabled is the accessory of AI to knowledge work. And this is really crucial because language, which the AI systems can now understand, in quotes, analyze and produce, language is foundational to how our society works. It's fundamental to how we communicate knowledge and facts. It underlies most disciplines such as law, medicine, humanities, science, and engineering. It enables reasoning, debate, and problem solving. It preserves history and culture across generations, facilitates human collaborations at scale. So once you crack language, you crack everything. Now these AI systems are no longer narrow. They're broadly applicable. The same AI system that produces competent results in law can produce competent results in medicine, in philosophy, in engineering. Competent, I say, not necessarily excellent results, right? Although they're getting better, they make mistakes, and in many ways, they're still much worse than human experts. But even getting competent results is a remarkable achievement, and I expect them to continue to get better. So economists say that modern AI systems like ChatGPT are general purpose technologies, meaning they apply across broad domains, almost basically every domain of human inquiry, because they're trained on language, and language spans the entire of human inquiry. These things can say things that are fairly sensible about just about every topic. So this is why this is really interesting, and why I always make the emphasis that you have to distinguish AI systems before 2022 and after 2022, because they're very different. So where are we today? Today we have advanced proprietary, what are known as frontier models. These are the models trained by the top level labs that are performing at the best. Some of the top labs that you may have heard of or companies are OpenAI, which their latest, most advanced models are GPT 4.5, which just came out last week, which I was honestly a little disappointed with. But they also have more advanced reasoning models, which I will talk about. Anthropic is another big player, which has a model called Claude. Their most recent model is 3.7 Sonnet, equally good as ChatGPT. Pretty good, but slightly behind, in my opinion, is Google, which has their Gemini series. And then surprisingly, out of nowhere, X.AI, Musk's company, produced Grok 3, which I've been using. It is actually quite good. A lot of people were skeptical, but in my opinion, it is a top-notch model. So those are, sorry, I didn't mention, those are the proprietary models that you have to pay for. There's also a bunch of open weights models. These are not quite open source models, but these are AI models produced by companies like Meta, or you may have heard of DeepSeek. They produce these models and then they give them out free to the world, and you can do what you will with it. You can specialize them, you can customize them. These have been really interesting because when AI started with the large language models in November 2022, the open models were way behind, 2 years behind in terms of capabilities. Then they became a year behind. Now they're about 6 months behind. So the very, very best frontier model that costs billions of dollars, the free model is only 6 months behind, and the gap is closing, which is kind of a fascinating scenario. So if you heard the whole excitement about DeepSeek from China, that's demonstrating they were able to produce a model that's only about 6 months behind the top models. and they gave it away to the world for free, which is kind of fascinating. Another thing to take note that there's a lot of AI systems that are built on top of these frontier models like GPT and OpenAI. So in law, we use systems like LexisNexis and Westlaw. These are specialized legal reasoning systems, but on the back end, they go and they talk to these frontier models. So in other words, Lexis and Westlaw don't make their own AI models. They use the best-in-class models produced by other companies, and they build on top of it. These are sometimes called composite systems. There's a lot of these out there. They're really good. They often will provide security and privacy guarantees that the models that you might be familiar with, that ChatGPT don't necessarily provide. And then there's a bunch of other AI models that are specialized for research, medicine, self-driving cars, what have you. So AI keeps getting better. So on the one hand, some people are a little disappointed with the rate of AI since 2022. So given the giant step change with the release of ChatGPT and the GPT-4 in 6 months, a lot of people thought AI was on a skyrocket curve, and so much so that several nonprofits in March of 2023 said, pause AI research for 6 months. It's moving too fast. We're going to have human-level AGI by the end of March. That didn't happen. But it has been steadily improving. So don't quote this number because I just made it up. But by informal estimation, AI is getting about 10% better each year than it was the year before. So, and this is based upon various internal tests and looking at benchmarks, but that's not a real number. That's just an internal estimate on my part. So what does that mean? It means, well, every year, the error rate and the hallucinations go down 10%. It can solve 10% more problems than it couldn't solve before. It's getting a little bit more accurate. But remember, these increases are compounding, meaning that every 10% is 10% better than the year before, which is 10% better. So while it hasn't skyrocketed over the 10-year period, you can expect the improvements to aggregate significantly, even if they move incrementally from year to year. So that's an important fact to keep in mind. They still make mistakes. You need to double, triple, quadruple check them, especially if you're a lawyer in law. Do not turn in a brief created by AI without checking it, please. And we have a whole new paradigm. So while it seems that the paradigm of making the models bigger and bigger has sort of ended with GPT 4.5, there are other paradigms for making these systems smarter. Now we have AI systems that think and reason before they answer. One of the most exciting aspects, of course, that we're going to see is the rise now of autonomous AI agents. So let's focus on that. Where have autonomous AI agents come from? Well, basically, autonomous AI agents have come from the fact that these base models, these AI models have gotten a little bit smarter each year and can do a little bit more that they couldn't do past year. So now they're at a moment where they can do enough things in a row that we've enabled autonomous AI agents. So what is an autonomous AI agent? Let me first show you, and then I'll define it. So what we have here is something from OpenAI called OpenAI Operator. And this is a tool, a system which can use a web browser. It can go to any web page and can do anything you or I can do on a web page. It reads it, and then it kind of figures out what to do. So here I asked it to register me for this conference here, and I'll show you what it did. So I launched it off. This is it on its own. It figures out to go to the web browser. It found the web page. It found the right conference. It found the registration form. It clicked it. And then this is an important moment here. So now it's kind of stuck. So it has to ask me, tell me about it's only stuck because it doesn't, not because there's an objectively right answer. It needs to know for me, am I attending in person or am I attending online? So I have to provide it some answer, which I do. So I'm giving it some feedback. It continues on. I tell it in person, and it figures out the right button to pick based upon in person. It asks me for more information. I tell it that I'm faculty, I give it my name, my email, it populates all the right fields. So this is amazing, and this is an example of an autonomous agent. It is out there figuring out what are the right buttons to do. So there's not great definitions of autonomous agents, and we're going to talk about this on the first panel, but there are some features that they share. And some of the features that they share are, these are AI systems where you give them a high-level goal, as opposed to having the human click and do everything for the system or give it steps. You give it a high-level goal, which is register for a conference or book me a flight or buy me some NVIDIA stock or drive from Boulder, Colorado to Denver. And then the system itself, the AI agent itself, has the ability to figure out what the user is asking for. So first it interprets the request, then it plans, it can figure out what necessary steps do I have to get to in order to register for the conference. And then it has some ability to make its own decisions about its own actions after understanding its environment. So we saw Operator doing this. It has access to software tools like web browsers. So it had the ability to plan. It figured out what it needed to do in order to find the Silicon Flatiron's website. It figured out that it needed to do a search, find the website, and then it had to react to what it saw. It had to react to the web links. It clicked on the page, then it had to read the page, figure out which conference was this conference, click on that, figure out what the right button was to register. It's able to click on that. And then it reached a point where it couldn't do anything more on its own because it didn't know my personal preferences, my name, my email, et cetera, and had to ask the human user. So this is an example of autonomous system because it is making decisions about its own actions as opposed to having the human tell it what to do. These autonomous systems range on a spectrum from fully autonomous, where you can send a software agent out and it'll do a whole bunch of stuff and not really come back and ask the human, to semi-autonomous like we saw, where it'll do some things, kind of not have enough information, have to come back to the user. And there are various levels of autonomy. So here's another example of an autonomous agent. You might have heard that OpenAI released something called Deep Research. So this is a very thorough research tool. You ask it a research question, like tell me about autonomous AI systems. It'll then ask for clarification. You give it some clarification about what you want, and then it goes out on its own, does all the research, uses the AI system itself to figure out, to plan, to figure out what it's reading about, and then it comes back with a report. So this is kind of the state of the art. This was just released a month ago. And it's important to emphasize that the reason I told you about all the AI before is that these autonomous AI systems are built upon those systems like GPT-4 or Claude underneath. So they use those systems to understand the user aspect, to make a plan about what to do based upon the user's high-level goal, and to interpret the data that they're getting, whether they're web browsing. There are different types of autonomous systems. One thing I want to talk about is the difference between physical agents and software agents. So physical agents or physical systems are things like self-driving cars or robots that operate in the physical world. And they operate on a similar principle in terms of planning, reacting to the environment, but there are very different considerations because there are people and buildings and things like out there in the world that they can harm or bump into. But it's a very similar idea, as opposed to software AI agents, autonomous agents. These are systems like I showed you. They don't operate in the physical world. They operate in the digital world, and they have at their disposal a series of software tools. These are things like web browser or maybe coding environments like Python. They might have things like, these are called APIs, which are ways of accessing data or functionality on particular websites or tools for doing math. And the systems themselves in the software agents know about these tools, and they decide when and if they should use those tools on their own. So no one's telling them, here's the search, go to Google and do that search and look at the results. It figures out that it doesn't know enough information and it needs more context. So it decides, and it knows that it can use a tool. So those are software agents. Let me show you an example of a physical agent. So this was in San Francisco in the fall. I took a Waymo self-driving car, and this was it pulling up to pick me up. If you go to San Francisco and several other cities these days, these are all over the place. And this is my video from the back seat here.
Just give us 1 minute to cover a few riding tips. This experience may feel futuristic, but the need to buckle up is the same as always. So keep your seatbelt fastened, please.
It did a phenomenal job. I felt extremely safe. There was a lot of weird things that could have happened that it avoided. You know, people walked in front of the car and it didn't present any problems. What I want to talk about, why are we talking about this today? It's because there's been a capability jump. When you increase by 10% and then 10% again, we're at this moment now where AI systems can go out and do multiple things correctly on their own. So just last year, AI systems, these autonomous agents couldn't do that. So when I showed you the web browser, very routinely, you would ask an AI system, go register for a conference, and they'd get stuck. They'd get confused by the website, or they'd enter in your name in the zip code form, right? They'd make very basic mistakes. Now we're at the point where they're just a little bit better, but that little bit is enough that they can now do 10, 20, 30, 40 steps on their own and get it all right. So now we're on the verge of these systems being able to do lots of things out there in the world. Here's another example. I mentioned Grok 3 doing deep research. So it's pretty easy at this point to replicate this kind of autonomous agent. So we're at the threshold where these things are coming because it's no longer the future. This stuff is here. Well, I want to leave time for Q&A, but I just want to emphasize this is an important conversation to have now, because now the capabilities are here and they just weren't here as recently as last year. So let me pause for a moment and take any questions from the audience. And our tradition is that the first question always goes to a student. So we have our first question over here.
Hi, I just had a question about ChatGPT's newest model. I've noticed it's been using emojis and trying to convey emotion. Is that like a design choice?
Yes, so a lot of the model makers have realized that people like AI systems with pleasing personalities and that seem friendly. There's actually a great term called AI sycophancy. And have you ever typed in some idea and the AI system, that's a great idea. And they're like, I am a genius. Well, don't get excited. Everyone's a genius, according to the AI. So the AI system will tell everybody their ideas are great. And the reason is it's trained on human preferences. So what they do is when they're training these models, they put two answers side by side, and they have a human pick the better answer. And which answer is the human going to pick? Well, of course, the answer that tells them they're a genius versus the answer that doesn't. But that being said, they also are training these models to be more friendly. And that's a great example. Yes? And please wait for the microphone.
Harry, great presentation. My question is about ethical AI. Say you're in that Waymo car and you hit a pedestrian. Who's liable for that accident?
Yeah, this is a great question. And these are the kinds of questions that maybe the third panel, I don't know, will be addressing. But these are the questions that are now arising because these systems are out there that we have to grapple with as a society. So the answer is our society has to figure it out. There are any number of choices it could make. It could put it on the self-driving car company. It could maybe put it on the driver, or the passenger of the car. Depends upon what happens. But other things to consider, though, this is something I always make. We should also consider the error rate that human drivers have and make sure that if it is the case, there's a lot of evidence that self-driving cars are safer under certain circumstances, that we're not unduly inhibiting technology that reduces the overall level of accidents But it is a concern that we need to think about. Yes, in the middle, and please wait for the microphone. Oh.
Hi.
Yeah, that's okay. Yeah, great.
I have asked ChatGPT 25 times now not to ask me follow-on questions, and I've asked it why it asks me follow-on questions, and it told me that it's programmed to further engagement. And it's told me 25 times that it will not ask a follow-on question, and it continues to do so. Is there a way to actually get it to stop doing that, and what is causing this?
So that's a great question, and that is both symbolic of the strengths and weaknesses of these systems. So these systems are trained as one-size-fits-all systems, and one-size-fits-all fits nobody, right? So this is a good example where your particular preferences don't align, and also these systems don't announce their weaknesses the way previous technologies. So they seem omniscient and perfect, but they're not, and they make errors. There are ways that you may be able to do it through customized instructions if you pay for the certain model. The free models you can't, but on the paid models you can give it customized, and they will usually, but not always, follow your instructions. But well, I'm happy to talk about it afterwards. In the middle, in the black, had a great question.
So within the last year or so, I remember reading that there was an issue with ChatGPT having trouble with basic arithmetic and mathematics. But then as they improved that skill, that it seemed skills in other areas were declining. So it got smarter in one area, but then it kind of started to get dumber in other areas. And I wonder if you have any insight into that, and also reflecting on your statement that you felt this technology was improving overall.
Yes, no, this is a great question. So you're absolutely right. The way these systems work are not understandable even to the programmers who create them. They have trillions of these pattern matchers called parameters that work together to produce one word at a time based upon the prompt and the previous text that it's produced. So first of all, that's not a great way to do math problems, is kind of by looking at the previous words. So one way that they've gotten around this is by telling the model, aha, when I encounter a math problem, let's use one of the tools that I have available to me. And for example, they have various math tools, like software tools, that it kind of outsources the math to a tool like a calculator almost, that'll do it right. So that's one of the reasons it's improved. They also have improved the math reasoning by kind of the old one word at a time method, which is a little less reliable. But to your basic question, which is when you improve something, these systems are so large and not understandable, you can accidentally reduce the capability of other things. So say you've trained it to be good at poems, and then you give it a bunch of math problems. The math problems can accidentally make it worse at poems, and you've no way of doing that other than testing it out. So it's much more of an art than a science at this point. That said, they are getting smarter across the board. So, even though one model may have gotten slightly worse at making poems, probably that model is still overall better at doing poems than the model a year before. That makes sense? Yes. Down here, please.
Thank you. Great presentation. So from what you said, I kind of understood that you think we're still in a linear progression, so to speak, 10% each year. A couple of days ago, OpenAI released a new product. For $200,000, you get an agent that performs at the level of PhD. Does that break the model? Are we having more of a exponential increase in capabilities now, or do you still consider that being part of incremental growth?
Yeah, so I would say, what I was saying, it actually is exponential. It's that the improvement factor is 10% exponential, right? So exponential is when you multiply each increment, and linear is when you add. So if it were just adding 10% each year, there would be linear, but it's 10% on top of the 10% increase. That said, the thing I think what we're seeing is, what is that year-to-year exponential increase? Is it 100%, which means it would double in capabilities, and that's sort of what we saw from 2022 to 2023. And now we're seeing 10%, but the AIs, I'd say I don't know. I'm just sort of reflecting back. The AI labs have much better visibility on the future, and if that's what they're saying, I'm inclined to trust them. What I like to do is think about what people were saying in the past, then see what has actually happened and go back and look, were their predictions aligned with what we now know had happened? And we know their predictions were wrong 2 years ago compared to the rate of, they were predicting, 50, 80% exponential, and what's actually happened, in my opinion, is about 10%. But that doesn't mean that we could have another step change. So nobody really knows. Yeah, that's a great question. In the back there. And then I think we have time for one more question. All right, this is.
Yeah, one of the things that's been interesting to me, just a layperson, is seeing some of the focus go from the big frontier models to seeing like smaller, more specialized models that can also maybe be more efficient. And so do you think that that's a niche that smaller companies that aren't XAI or OpenAI could maybe fill and be more competitive in?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, particularly with open weights models being only about 6 months behind the much more advanced models, a startup can take these open weights models and specialize them for various uses. I think that's a really important business model, and that's certainly been happening and going to be happening more. That said, there will always be use cases where people want the best and the smartest model, and they're willing to pay for it, whether it's scientific research or business or finance. Unfortunately, we are out of time. However, the good news is we have a break. There's food in the room in the Betcher Hall. We have about a 15-minute break. We'll be back here at 10 for our first panel. Thank you so much.